our repeated visits to the horror picture were certain laws that happen to apply to all horror pictures. The innocent must suffer. The poor sap who walks into the house has to be tormented. And then the next law came into, we came to realize there was a second law governing all horror pictures, and that was the guilty must be punished. Whatever evil thing there is out there, whatever dark force there is, the audience wants to see the hero lay into it pretty intensely. We found there was a third law, and that is that you must taste blood to be a man. You've got to go through this coming of age through this blood experience. Now, Joel and Ethan Coen have mentioned that a fourth law exists, that the dead must walk. We're still testing that law in our research labs to see if it holds true in all cases.
Welcome back, Midnight viewers. Dig that theme song, man. That is my co-host HP, if I haven't hammered home that fact. The name of the track, in case you're wondering, is Top Down, as in driving around in a convertible, which is the feeling I'm aiming for you to experience. A leisurely drive down a coastal highway at midnight, with storm clouds swallowing the moon. I'm your host, Father Malone, and I couldn't in good conscience call this a weekly roundup. This is more of a weekend send-off. Plus, Ripley is asleep in the sun outside, which is where I ought to be. Plus, I've rounded the week up twice already. What more do you need? But it isn't often I get an opportunity to review something day of. And I got laid off recently, so I've got a little extra time until I can rectify that situation, hopefully, which I figure I ought to channel back into this here show. So this week is embarrassingly full, and next week should be back to normal. Fingers crossed, here we are. This will probably be shorter than a regular episode, but it's entirely focused on one film only. Anyone remember this quote? The most ferociously original horror film of the year. That was in 1982. The film is Evil Dead, and the quote is from Stephen King, who had just caught a screening at the Cannes Film Festival, where he was promoting Creepshow. King was a huge proponent of that first film, at the time calling it his fifth favorite horror movie of all time. A lot of great filmmakers come to the profession after detours in other areas of interest. It's not uncommon to hear someone in the world of fine art or music or animation who stumbled their way into the medium. I tend to think of filmmaking like poetry. With enough time and effort, everyone has at least one worthwhile ballad or sonnet within them. Not free verse, though. Fuck off into the sun with that Beat Generation bullshit. Filmmaking is a collaborative enough endeavor that, with the right crew, basically anyone could make at least a watchable flick. And then there are those that are born with aspect ratios in their eyes. When you consider how many people have made films, the fact is there are only a handful of genuine savants. Kubrick and Kurosawa, Martin Scorsese, Sajid Ray, Sergio Leone, Spike Lee. I'm going to stop here and pause so every single one of you listening can say the name of the filmmaker that ends this sentence. I can't believe he didn't mention... Go ahead. Here, we'll try it another way. Oh my God, how could he forget? You good? Moving on. Every deck has a joker. In this case, straight from Detroit, USA, comes the seemingly least likely cinematic genius of all time, Mr. Sam Raimi. Raimi had a Super 8 film society going in high school and spent the 1970s teaching himself how to make movies through a series of crude, ingenious short films. And a feature I'd like to point out. It's Murder! Is often lumped in with his early short films, but it's 70 minutes. That's longer than most Corman films. All of those shorts are available on YouTube, including It's Murder, which is one of the rare early cinematic efforts that doesn't feature latter-day Vincent Price by way of Errol Flynn Bruce Campbell. Instead, Raimi himself is the star, and you know what? He's really good in it. The first Fangoria magazine I ever laid hands on was issue 23. I bought it because it had a headline that read, "Who really directed Poltergeist?" It was Tobe Hooper, by the way. It says it in the credits. But the image on the cover didn't hurt in making up my mind about owning that particular periodical. It had Bruce Campbell, rivulets of blood covering his face, a chainsaw defensively held high, a screaming woman behind him, and on either side of the frame, two skeletal hands reaching forward, meaning whatever it was attacking them was us. The headline there was, "Evil Dead, Can They Be Stopped?" As it turns out, no, they couldn't. Thanks to a release strategy that included release in theaters and videotape simultaneously, I was able to get my grubby hands on the flick almost immediately, and I was floored immediately. It may have been the first time I felt like there was a definite voice behind a film. Any film, honestly. As stylish or beautifully or economically or majestically made anything I had seen up until that point, this felt different. This felt conversational. And an idiosyncratic conversation at that. And doing it in a genre that I already was in love with, without ever seeming to be embarrassed by that genre. In fact, here was a filmmaker willing to go all the fucking way with the horror while leavening everything with humor, and that level of silly, of the ridiculousness, felt appropriate and not like it was winking. Can't you just tell when a filmmaker is slumming in horror, quote unquote? Those horror flicks reek of, if it's great, I'll take the glory, and if it sucks, hey, it's only a horror movie, who cares? See Jennifer's Body if you want to witness that phenomenon. Up until then, the only other flick I'd seen that walked the tightrope of humor horror was An American Werewolf in London, and that movie is tame comparatively.
Also, in one of the Super 8 comedies that I had made, we had a point where there was a scare. Someone jumps out and grabs someone. And during the comedy, the audience really jumped. And I thought, boy, this is great. This is kind of a new thrill. So I started writing horror stories as opposed to comedies, just because it was a different way to entertain people, and I had fun with it.
That quote is from an interview given at the time of Evil Dead's release. The one you heard over the show's opening theme, that quote came from an interview Raimi gave for a UK show called This Is Horror from '92. I'll link it in the show notes. But this earlier interview, from 1982, is the first interview I ever saw of him. I saw it around 84 or 85 on a compilation videotape I picked up through a tape exchange I had going with a guy I had met through Fangoria. He was kind enough to put that and a few other interviews with other horror luminaries. His quote about the relationship between humor and horror stuck with me. But more than that, more foundational in my cinematic worldview was this quote.
The worst crime I think that filmmakers can make is to make a boring picture. If it's boring, then it's all over. The audience, you've failed in entertaining them. You've committed a crime.
Ask HP if I haven't been parroting that sentiment since high school. Movies are supposed to be entertaining. Raimi gave us the word, and then he backed it up over and over and over again. You might not like his films, you might not like the genres he plays in, which is a silly notion considering how far he's stretched as a filmmaker. He made a baseball movie, but you'll never be bored. And if you're not entertained, then that's on you. Raimi's made a career as one half Barnum, one half Val Lewton, and one half Moe, Larry, and Curly. I'm not a math person. He's followed his interest and managed to keep all of them idiosyncratic and interesting. Obviously, Evil Dead 2, a flick I had to sneak into several times because it was unrated and therefore verboten, is a masterpiece. When he couldn't afford the rights to radio drama stalwart The Shadow, Raimi created his own pulp hero in Darkman, an early salvo in what would come to define the superhero genre when Raimi entered the 21st century. Along the way, he put out the aforementioned baseball flick For Love of the Game, the supernatural psychological thriller The Gift, and quite honestly, one of my favorite westerns of the past 30 years, his wildly underrated The Quick and the Dead. I know that movie wasn't getting made without Sharon Stone, but if it were anyone else in the lead, I wouldn't have to bring it up as if you'd never heard of it. Not that he'd have any trouble getting anything made after 2001 with his trilogy of Spider-Man films. You know what the secret ingredient in those films is? Just like all of his films, they're fun. In the midst of that 90s comic book brooding dark revolution that spilled over into cinemas, Raimi was reminding us that it'd be pretty fucking cool to be able to run up the side of a building or swing from skyscrapers. He never forgot that comic book characters sprang from childhood wishes, not adult concerns. Since then, he's done quite a bit of television. He's one of the most prolific producers in Hollywood with his Ghost House pictures, and he managed to still make a huge epic in Oz the Great and Powerful, a film I need to see a second time. I remember feeling then that it was overstuffed and unwieldy. And when Marvel couldn't get a handle on the latest Doctor Strange flick, unable to balance the comedy and drama and action and, yes, horror, Raimi got back in the game, and I love that movie. People eviscerated it upon release, to which I say, the climax of the film involves our hero puppeteering his own corpse that's wearing a giant cape made out of swirling demons. The film I didn't mention is my favorite of latter-era Raimi, and the one that most resembles the feature we're discussing today. Drag Me to Hell came out of nowhere. A simple race-against-time plot in which a mousy, stepped-over bank clerk takes the wrong opportunity to advance her career and pays and pays and pays. It is signature Raimi. Buckets of ooze, buckets of creepy crawlies. whip pans and jump scares, and the same underlying dread that courses throughout those Evil Dead flicks. I know those are comedies, but I find those films deeply disturbing at their core, and that's laid bare with Drag Me to Hell. Not to mention, Raimi managed to turn an embroidered handkerchief into a credible threat. That's some fucking talent, brother. And that film came along at the exact right time, a not-so-gentle reminder that the man gesturing to the limitless horizon with your pal Spider-Man was also a deeply talented merchant of doom. Send Help, his latest, is his first film in nearly 30 years that doesn't have a supernatural or superpowered center. This is a real-world drama. Real being a relative term when Raimi is involved, and it's a two-hander, not something we've gotten from him previously. Let me just run the trailer.
I am next in line for VP. When Bradley takes over for his father tomorrow.
Your father promised her a promotion.
Did he? As an executive, I see no value in you. Does that make sense?
What?
We have the merger coming up. Prove me wrong. Bring her, and then we'll ship her out. Check this out.
I'm Linda Little. I want to be the next
Are there any others? Have you tried making a distress signal? Or a bigger fire?
Getting us out of here should be your focus, not being Susie Homemaker.
You do know you would have died out there.
Yeah, how do you think that would have worked out for you? Are you gonna hunt a boar? Linda from accounting?
Strategy and planning, actually. You ever hunt? I think I like it. How valuable to the company am I now? No help is coming. This is how things are now. Not in the office anymore. You are stuck with an asshole boss, just like I was. Don't ever mistake my kindness for weakness. I don't think we should ever leave here.
One of the bonuses of stepping into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, hey, I'm the pizza papa, was inheriting that film's cast. More specifically, Rachel McAdams. Thank God he did. This is her movie. I'll get to Dylan O'Brien, but my God, McAdams is on fire. Everyone first got to look at her in Tina Fey's high school touchstone Mean Girls, and she's essayed every kind of role since, comedy and drama and tearjerker, every kind of role but horror. It was worth the fucking wait. Send Help is the most simple, high-concept plot for a film. Linda Little, played by McAdams, is a 7-year veteran at a finance company who's been promised a vice president's job by the company's owner. On the eve of said event, the owner dies and his spoiled, rotten son has inherited. And he's much more interested in short-skirted secretaries and promoting his golf bros than actually acknowledging effort and dedication from his employees. It's almost parallel to the opening of Drag Me to Hell, but that's where the parallel ends. Linda is brought along on a flight to Bangkok in order to smooth over a merger she has intimate knowledge of, with the idea that once her usefulness is spent, she's going to be shown the door. That is, until we get to the first of an endless stream of set pieces that are alternately horrifying, thrilling, and above all, hilarious. I know the idea of a plane going down and all of its crew and passengers perishing isn't a laughing matter, but then you haven't seen this movie. I found myself cackling through the entire ordeal. And I'm a terrible flyer, by the way. I'm one of the ones that Stephen King describes as keeping the airplane aloft through sheer power of my terror. And yet I was laughing all the while being reminded what a singular and interesting filmmaker Raimi has always been. The film has been described as Misery meets Castaway, and that's fair. But imagine Misery from Annie Wilkes' perspective. And imagine Paul Sheldon is a total cocksucker who tries to screw Annie over at every opportunity. That's a bit closer. Because her boss, Nepo baby personified Bradley, played by Dylan O'Brien, is just that. An unrepentant man-child that continues to order her around despite the fact that they're stranded and despite the fact that he has zero survival skills. Not so Linda. In one of those great pans across someone's house, that's the stock and trade of Robert Zemeckis, where the decorations and personal items describe everything we need to know about a character, we discover that Linda's library is entirely populated with non-fiction guides on nature and survivalism. You can see where this is going. It's an upending of power dynamics. Professional, political, and gender dynamics aren't spared either, with the lack of civilization making Linda come to life and blossom, and Bradley slowly wither away. From the advertising, I expected this would be another 90-minute offering of Raimi's, just a run-and-gun potboiler of two characters trying to destroy one another. And that would have been great, but Raimi has chosen to let the story and the characters breathe. So it's not as cut and dry as who's going to kill who. The action slows as much as it ramps up, and what we get are exceedingly well-defined characters who are constantly defying the audience's expectations. Your allegiance will shift, which is wonderful. I had virtually no experience with Dylan O'Brien as an actor. I'd managed to avoid those Maze Runner films, and the idea of a serious teen wolf was too much for me to bear. Wolf, bear. But I kept staring at him through the film because he seemed so fucking familiar. Once they'd been on the island for a while and his facial hair started to grow, it finally occurred to me. He was one of the bright spots in that Jason Reitman movie, Saturday Night. Dylan O'Brien was Dan Aykroyd in that flick. He was fucking great. He's better here. Obviously, he's been given a lot more to do, but Jesus, I expected greatness from McAdams. I was unprepared for O'Brien. The fact is, I fucking hated his character, but he kept me riveted. Raimi dispenses with a lot of his signature moves here, no whip pans or fisheye lenses, but it's no less kinetic or fascinating or beautiful. This is probably his most luxuriant film. The jungles are lush, the storm sequences are beautiful and harrowing, and there are genuine horror elements with nighttime fog banks and moonlit ghostly encounters, and a couple of jump scares that I felt were totally legitimate. Oh, and goo. He's never flagged in his dedication to characters spewing bile and worse, so if vomit isn't your thing, this might not be your movie. As usual, I'm trying to go light on spoilers. The movie just came out, but as straightforward as the story is, that doesn't mean there aren't twists and revelations. Several times I heard myself gasp audibly. And while this isn't a spoiler, I'm not giving you details. Raimi managed to work those 3 horror laws into the feature. The innocent must suffer? Check. The guilty must be punished? Check. The hero must taste blood to become a man. Let's just swap in adult, okay? Check. The jury is still out on that 4th law, the Coen brothers law that the dead must walk. I agree with them, but Raimi doesn't need it. Neither does Send Help. This is the most fun I've had at the movies in a long, long time. I always encourage you to get out to the cinemas, but I really mean it here. Raimi isn't hurting or anything. He's got a bunch of projects in various states of production, but it's the film itself. It's an original thriller. No IP, no remake or reboot. A new feature from one of the titans of American filmmaking. If we can't support that, then everything left is streaming. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this special episode. Monday, Mike White is back to talk about Hammer House of Horror. That's the house that bled to death. If you want to lend me a monetary hand, I'm not going to say no. Patreon.com/Father Malone. Patrons get shows early, and they get shows that aren't in the regular feed. Though if you want to help and are as broke as I am, then do me a favor. If you would please subscribe to the show on this and any podcatcher and write some reviews. Tell your friends. I don't know. Until next time, everybody, try to enjoy the daylight.
When I saw The Hills Have Eyes, one of the most gut-wrenching horror pictures I've ever seen in my life, they had a scene where these hill people come into this trailer. They completely massacre the people that were living in the trailer. They take a parakeet, they bite its head off and drink it like a glass of blood. And then they come across this baby and they wonder whether they should raise it as their own or eat the baby because baby is good meat. And it's such a horrible scene that you're thinking, eat the baby. Don't raise it as one of your own. Please don't do that. That's even more heinous. Anyways, after they leave and the people come back to this trailer, they view all the carnage. And one of the things they see is a picture of the Jaws poster, the monster that's been like ripped in half. So I took it to mean that Wes Craven, the director of the movie, was saying, Jaws was just pop horror. What I have here is real horror. It's ripped that baby in half. So as a joke and as an homage to Wes Craven, I took a Hills Have Eyes poster and an Evil Dead, I put it in the cellar, one of the sets, and I ripped it in half to say, no, Wes, your picture's just pop horror. This is real horror. But just as a joke, of course. Now Wes Craven has responded in his picture by putting a clip of Evil Dead #1 as a horror movie in a scene that a character is watching in his movie Nightmare on Elm Street. I guess as to say, no, Your movie, Evil Dead, is just a horror movie. Nightmare on Elm Street is the real horror. So I'm not sure where I'm going to go from there. I'm kind of running out of ideas, but we'll figure something out.